Hello and welcome to Stories for Sleep, Storyteller Chills. Like and subscribe for daily videos. In the quiet town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, nestled among endless fields and lonely dirt roads, lived a man whose name would become synonymous with horror itself. Ade Jane, a shy, reclusive farmer who hid a darkness so unimaginable it would inspire some of the most disturbing characters in cinematic history. Norman Bates from Psycho, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs. Born in 1906, Ade was raised under the iron grip of his mother, Augusta Jane, a fanatically religious woman who taught her sons that the world was filled with sin, and that women, especially, were instruments of the devil. His father was an abusive alcoholic, and his brother Henry would die under mysterious circumstances years later, leaving Ade alone with his mother. When Augusta died in 1945, Ade's world shattered. She had been his only friend, his only teacher, his only love, and when she was gone, something inside him broke. He sealed off the rooms she used, preserving them like a shrine, and began living in squalor amid piles of trash, old books, and decaying remains. But soon, Ade's loneliness turned into obsession. He began reading books about anatomy, Nazi experiments, and death cults, and then he started visiting the local graveyards at night. Armed with a shovel and lantern, Ade Jane exhumed recently buried women who reminded him of his mother. He took their bodies home, not out of hatred, but out of longing. He used their skin and bones to create furniture, masks, even a full woman's suit, something he could wear to feel close to his mother again. For years, no one suspected the quiet handyman from Plainfield. Until November 16, 1957, when local hardware store owner Bernice Worden vanished. Police followed the trail to Jane's farmhouse. What they found inside would haunt them forever. Human skulls used as bowls, chairs upholstered in human skin, a belt made of nipples, masks made from faces. Ade Jane calmly confessed. He admitted to killing 2 women, but said most of what they found came from grave robbing. He was declared insane and spent the rest of his life in mental institutions, dying in 1984 at the age of 77. But Ade Jane's legacy didn't die with him. His crimes changed the face of horror, inspiring decades of films, books, and nightmares. Because his story reminds us of one chilling truth. Monsters aren't always born in the dark. Sometimes they live quietly next door. In the heart of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, behind the door of apartment 213, lived a man whose name would become forever linked to one of the darkest chapters in modern history. Jeffrey Dahmer, a quiet, polite neighbor who, for more than a decade, hid a secret so horrifying even seasoned detectives struggled to believe what they saw. Born in 1960, Dahmer seemed like any other child, shy, withdrawn, curious. But from an early age, he was fascinated by death. He collected animal bones, dissected roadkill, and spoke of what lay beneath the surface of living things. His parents' constant fighting and their eventual divorce only deepened his isolation. By the time he graduated high school, something inside him had already begun to rot. In 1978, just weeks after graduation, Dahmer picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. He took him home, got him drunk, and when Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer struck him with a dumbbell, his first murder. He dismembered the body and scattered the remains. Then, for nearly a decade, he stayed quiet, but his dark urges never left. By the late 1980s, Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment had become a chamber of nightmares. He lured men home with promises of money, drinks, or photos, and once the door shut, few ever left alive. Inside those walls, Dahmer experimented with control, drugging his victims, performing twisted acts of necrophilia, and keeping parts of their bodies as trophies. When police finally entered his apartment in July 1991, the horror was beyond imagination. A refrigerator filled with human heads, jars containing organs, a barrel of acid, and photographs documenting every gruesome stage of his crimes. Jeffrey Dahmer calmly confessed to killing 17 young men and boys. He spoke with chilling detachment, describing each act as if it were routine. He said he never wanted to hurt them, only to keep them forever. In 1992, Dahmer was sentenced to life in prison, but justice would come sooner than expected. 2 years later, he was beaten to death by a fellow inmate. Some called it vengeance, others called it release. Even in death, Dahmer's story continues to fascinate and horrify. A soft-spoken man who looked so ordinary, yet carried within him an unimaginable darkness. His crimes forced America to confront a terrifying truth. Evil doesn't always wear a monster's face. Sometimes it smiles politely from the apartment next door. Absolutely Here, a cinematic, true crime-style YouTube voiceover script about Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. It's written for about 4-5 minutes of narration, balanced between eerie storytelling and documentary realism. DNNIS RADR. For more than 3 decades, the people of Wichita, Kansas lived in quiet fear, haunted by 3 letters that struck terror into the heart of a city. BTK. Bind, torture, kill. Those were his words, the calling card of a man who blended into everyday life, even as he committed some of the most calculated murders in American history. Dennis Lynn Rader. A church leader, a husband, a father, and a cold-blooded killer. Born in 1945, Rader grew up seeming ordinary, but beneath that calm exterior, he nurtured violent fantasies from a young age. He craved control, dreamed of power, and imagined what it would feel like to make someone completely helpless. In January 1974, Rader turned fantasy into reality. He broke into the home of the Otero family, a mother, a father, and 2 young children. One by one, he bound them. He tortured them. He killed them. When police arrived, there were no clues. No fingerprints. No witnesses. Only whispers of a phantom who seemed to vanish into the Kansas air. Over the next 3 decades, BTK would strike again and again. He stalked his victims, studied their routines, watched them for weeks. Every murder was planned, a ritual of domination and control. And after each crime, he disappeared back into his ordinary life, leading Boy Scout meetings, attending church, smiling in family photos. But BTK didn't just want to kill, he wanted recognition. He began sending taunting letters to police and local news outlets, describing his crimes in chilling detail. He wanted fame. He wanted to be remembered. Then silence. For 10 years, nothing. The trail went cold. Many believed BTK was dead or locked away. Until 2004, when he couldn't resist the spotlight any longer. BTK sent another message, this time asking police if they could trace a floppy disk he wanted to use for his next communication. Investigators replied publicly, saying it would be safe. Rader took the bait. The disk was traced back to a computer at his church. Within days, police arrested Dennis Rader, the man who had lived among them for 30 years, hiding behind a mask of normalcy. When questioned, Rader confessed to 10 murders, calmly describing each one, as if recounting chores from an ordinary day. He showed no remorse, only pride in his own meticulous planning. In 2005, he was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, a fate far less brutal than the terror. Ted Bundy. He was handsome. He was charming. He was the kind of man who could walk into a room and have everyone smiling. But behind that confident grin lurked a predator. Ted Bundy, one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, proved that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a smile. Born in 1946, Theodore Robert Bundy seemed like the boy next door. Intelligent, polite, ambitious. But his early life was filled with secrets, lies about his parentage, rejection, and an obsession with control that grew darker with age. By the early 1970s, Bundy had become a rising star in politics and law school. No one imagined that, at night, he was stalking women, young, intelligent women, who all seemed to share one thing in common. They looked just like the woman who once broke his heart. Bundy's method was deceptively simple. He faked injuries, a broken arm, a cast, a crutch to gain sympathy. Then, when his victims offered to help, he struck. He bludgeoned them, kidnapped them, and vanished into the night. As bodies began to surface across multiple states, Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, police realized they were dealing with something new. A killer who blended intelligence with brutality. A man who studied law just to understand how to avoid getting caught. But Bundy couldn't stop. He didn't want to. He crossed the country, killing again and again, even breaking out of jail twice to continue his spree. In January 1978, he made his way to Florida, and what came next was pure madness. He broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In just minutes, 2 women were dead, 2 more were gravely injured. It was a massacre that shocked the nation and finally put the spotlight squarely on Ted Bundy. Bundy defended himself in court, charming reporters, flirting with women, and smiling for the cameras as if it were all a game. He was a master manipulator, intelligent, confident, terrifyingly calm. But the evidence was overwhelming. In 1979, Ted Bundy was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Even as he faced execution, he toyed with investigators, confessing to more than 30 murders, though many believe the true number is far higher. On January 24, 1989, at 7:16 a.m., the electric chair was switched on. Outside the prison, a crowd cheered as smoke rose from the roof. The charming killer was finally gone. Ted Bundy's story isn't just about murder. It's about deception. It's about how evil can disguise itself as kindness, how a monster can look you straight in the eyes and make you feel safe. Because the scariest thing about Ted Bundy isn't what he did. It's how easily he made the world believe he could never do it.